notice them, and then bring your attention back to the breath. do a contemplative meditation together to set our motivation for the day. As you remember, this class series was on karma, and so the main determining factor, right, whether karma is positive or negative, is one's motivation. So first we can kind of contemplate how amazingly fortunate we are to be here, to be human, human beings with freedom and opportunities. So you can actually contemplate how, from a Buddhist perspective, the most populous realm of existence are the hell realms. There are countless beings suffering in hell realms. Hot hells, cold hells, all other kind of varied hells. So we're so fortunate we're not in those realms of just only experiencing unbearable pain. And then the next most populous realm, right, are the hungry ghosts. The wandering kind of miserable spirits. Countless beings in those realms, we're free from that. Then we can see with our own senses, there are way more animals, including tiny fish, insects. Way more of those than humans, like uncountably more. We're so fortunate not to be like an animal. Those animals have no freedom, right, to train themselves in a path to enlightenment. No, we're not in like some pleasure realm where it's too distracting to practice path to enlightenment. But then even among human beings, so few actually have the opportunity to practice. If we look around, most human beings, right, either have wrong views, so they have no interest in like genuine spiritual practice, something beyond this life, or they're just totally caught up in worldly pursuits, totally distracted. Or they're in a place where there's not much opportunity because of the laws of that place, or because of just a lack of teachings available, because of poverty. So the fact that we're human, that we have a brain that works well enough, we have senses that are working well enough to read, to listen, that we have some degree of interest or faith. It's the most rare, the most precious thing in the universe, is having this kind of body. So this day, right, where we have every opportunity, right, with the right kind of body, right kind of mind, where like, we don't have something else we have to do, nobody's torturing us or chasing us or forcing us to do something else. Like this day is unbelievably precious. Like every opportunity, it's the most rare, most precious opportunity is being alive as a human being today. And this life won't last forever. It's absolutely certain I'm going to die. When I'll die, I don't know. time of death, for sure, right? Whatever money I have, actually will only cause me worry and grasping. Whatever possessions I have can't help me in the slightest. Also, friends and family, at the time of death, they'll just make me worried or grasp. Even my own body is of no use, right? It becomes a corpse at the time of death. It's the only thing that will give me peace of mind at that time is my inner training, my inner practice of love, compassion, of wisdom. Having created good karma, then I won't have regrets. I can't escape death, nobody can, but I can choose whether to live a good life or a bad life, whether to live a life I'll regret or a life I'll be contented by. So with this extremely brief life, this very precious day, I want to use it well. So the best way to use my life is to create or to connect with motivation of compassion, no bodhicitta. So there's no better motivation to use our day. There's no better state than compassion. That not just compassion that includes myself, everybody else in this room, everybody in this town, everybody in this state, everybody in this country, everybody in every country, all the animals, all beings, actually everybody, all sentient beings throughout the universe. So with a sense of limitless loving kindness and limitless compassion, recognizing the suffering of all beings, just knowing obviously that they want, just as much as I want to be happy, they want to be happy. Just as much as I don't want to suffer, they don't want to suffer. So cherishing them as I've in the past been habituated to cherishing myself. Then we think, my purpose for today is to progress, is to purify karma in order to progress to enlightenment as quickly as possible in order to be of benefit to all of us sentient. Let's come into a more interactive, are you ready? Interactive mode, talk together for a few minutes. So the first, today we said we would do like purification practices, right? So again, like last time, we'll do Vajrasattva's practice, but we'll also do the, today we'll also, and the first one we're going to do actually is the practice of prostration to the 35 Buddhas. Or sometimes it's called the Confession of Moral Downfalls to the 35 Buddhas. And it's actually in this booklet, it's in the Essential Prayers book, it starts on page like 42. We already did the motivation, so let's start on page 42. I'll make another comment. So this practice actually comes from the Buddha himself. So he taught this in a sutra it's called the Sutra of the Three Heaps. And actually, I'll make a general comment, then I'll ask if you want more detail, which I'd be happy to do. But the general comment is this: so the reciting of names, right, is actually based on this thing that what they say is that bodhisattvas, right, beings who are on the path to becoming a Buddha, at a certain level of their, once they achieve a high level, they've created so they're completing the two collections. That's what in Buddhism we call it. So the collection of merit, right, of good karma, and the collection of wisdom. And they have to complete the two collections. So in other words, the collection of merit, it creates the cause for their bodies, right, of Buddha's bodies, and the collection of wisdom for the physical bodies, right, the Sambhogakaya and the Manakaya, it's called. But then their collection of wisdom creates the cause for the Dharmakaya, right, their wisdom or truth body. And so anyway, so they reach a level eventually where they've created a huge amount of merit, of good karma. And then what happens, what bodhisattvas do at that point is they start dedicating the merit in certain ways. So they like do dedication prayers. And it's those dedication prayers that after they're a Buddha lead them to manifest in different ways. So for example, like Tara is famous for having, she reached that level of the path and then she dedicated, may I always manifest as a woman, right, as a female. Because there aren't enough female Buddhas for beings. A lot of planets have patriarchy. I want to manifest always as a woman. The medicine Buddha said, dedicated, right? May I be a healer, right? May beings just by seeing me be healed, things like that. So, and Manjushri, right? He dedicated, kind of like, may I always spread wisdom, right? And if there's a Buddha on some planet who's teaching other topics, may I manifest there and ask questions. But how about wisdom? What's the meaning of emptiness? And then if the Buddha's teaching just only a little bit on emptiness, I'll say, well, what's the deeper meaning of emptiness? That was his dedication, right? So he said, even though I'll be a Buddha, I'll manifest as Bodhisattva everywhere to ask about wisdom because he saw the value of wisdom so much. So like that, so Buddhas manifest, dedicate in different ways. So the idea is that these 35 Buddhas dedicated, when they were at that level, those levels of the path, they dedicated, they recognized how horrible negative karma is in creating suffering, right? And so they said, when I become a Buddha, just by saying my name, may beings be purified in this and that way. That was their dedication because they felt it was so unbearable. And we can go over it. Different ones dedicated different things. Some dedicated, anybody who has the anger, may it be purified by just saying my name. Some people said, some of them said, anybody who has desire may be purified. Some of them said, may 1,000 eons of negative karma, be purified just by saying my name once. So they did different prayers like that. So the Buddha kind of taught that. He said, since they did those dedication prayers, I'll teach you their names, and if you do this practice, then it helps purify negative karma. So that's like the story behind the sutra, or the story behind that sutra. And so I think in the class on, we did a class for the, what was it called? Establishing the daily practice, was that it, I think? And so we went over how to do this practice actually then. So I wasn't sure how much detail to go into because I think I went over in that time how much each Buddha purifies and all that. So maybe don't need to do all that again, I guess. So in brief though, right? What we do is so we'll visual. You're gonna do when you're actually, and I want to say this too, so we're gonna actually do it. We'll do the practice fully, but if you don't, it's up to you. You don't have to. In other words, if you want to actually get up, if you want to actually prostrate fully, you can prostrate fully. If you want to do a half prostration, you can do a half. If you don't feel like prostrating, just go like that. That's up to you. It's your own. That's your own business. So you can just go like this and say the names. So that's totally, that's just your choice and do it how you want to. And the first of the Buddhas is the Buddha of our eon, Buddha of our time, Shakyamuni Buddha. And that goes from there to other Buddhas. There are different ways. If you go to an FPMT retreat, there are different ways people do this practice. So while we do it together, we're just going to do it once today. But while we do it, I want to do it in the way like some people just keep prostrating while they recite the entire sutra, I mean the entire prayer. I just because I prefer it, I do it, like so each one I'll do one prostration reciting the name over and over. Does that make sense? Because,
Are we doing this, how does this relate to karma?
so that's what I'm about to get. So,
Oh.
so you have to do, so like, that's what I'll get to in a minute. So, but, so you have to, so if you can, then you visualize the 35 Buddhas, or I'm just describing the practice first and I'll get to that. Or the, yeah, I'll say it in a second. So you would visualize Shakyamuni in the middle, and then there are different visualizations. And I went over them in the other class. I won't go, but you can sort of. Ken Rinpoche said if you're good at visualizing, right, then do the detailed visualization. There are like different ones, and there's one with different rows of different colored Buddhas, and there's another with Shakyamuni in the middle, and 7 and 7 and 10 and 10. You know, so do it how you want to. But but then the way this relates to karma is that so. Because actually, this was the next topic, right? So remember last class, right? Last time here, we talked about the 4 opponent powers, right? And actually, so okay, so what are the 4 opponent powers?
Regret.
What else?
Reliance.
Resolve.
And what's resolve?
Sort of making a promise that you're not going to do it again, right?
And
For a certain period of time.
And what's the 4th one?
Confession?
Remedy.
Yeah, confess. Well, actually, it's something to. It's the remedy is probably a better trick because it's it's something that counteract. Right, it's like a practice, like Dr. Sun. Antidote. Yeah, that'd be a better way to put it. So an actual practice of an antidote, right? So and actually, what's reliance?
On the 3 jewels.
Refuge and
Oh, also bodhicitta, yeah, and also bodhicitta motivation, right? Compassion motivation, bodhicitta motivation. And actually, that one's important too. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why that's important, but one is that the reliance, right? In other words, we're changing because negative karma is created in relationships for the most part. And so the refuge part in the 3 jewels is important because we create negative karma in relation to the 3 jewels. So we're changing our relatedness to them, right? We're relating to them with faith rather than with whatever else, anger or some other negative state. But actually, the vast majority of our negative karma is usually created in relation to other people, right? Or other sentient beings, right? Not just people, because we kill and harm other kinds of beings too. And so by generating compassion, we're changing our. It's reliance in that sense too. That there was we created the negative karma by being too something, jealous or whatever, towards others. And now we're developing compassion to them. So we're putting ourselves in the right relatedness to them in the process of purifying our karma, because karma was relational in most cases. Not all, of course. There are times where it's just in your own mind, but the majority of karma is created relationally. So it's important to generate compassion or bodhicitta. So in this practice, right, the 35 Buddhas of confession practice, actually all those are in here, right? So if you look on page 43, right, it starts with right, homage to confession to the Bodhisattva's downfalls. I say you can say your name. Throughout all times, take refuge in the Guru, take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, take refuge in the Sangha. So at that point, that's the power of reliance. So this is actually a structured practice of the 4 opponent powers. So that's the power of reliance there. And then if you look on page 49, right, it's called the confession prayer. We'll do it in English, not the Tibetan. There's a whole part there that's regret, or as Rebecca put it, confession, but confession in this case is regret, right? So in this life, so you say here, in this life, and all states of rebirth in which I have circles of sorrow at the beginning of this time, whatever negative actions and then you list different kinds of negative actions. I've done them, I've made others do them, I've rejoiced in them, right? You've stolen, and it goes through different examples, stealing things and rejoicing in bad things, and it lists all different kinds, right? The 10 non-virtuous actions, and karmas that would cause beings to be born in hell, and as an animal, and so there you're actually contemplating regret, right? So you're actually thinking, I've done these things, and if I don't purify them, I'll be reborn in hell, I'll be reborn as a hungry ghost, I'll be reborn as an animal, I won't ever make progress. You go through and you're actually supposed to think of there about that.
Is it the right thing to focus on a specific thing, wrong thing you've done, or is it the nature of this particular practice that you're just going through like a laundry list of every possible thing that you might have done wrong?
So the way we'll do it, and because this is what I would recommend, is for this practice, it's good to do both actually. Like so I think again, some people will just do, will just run through the practice, right, and that's okay. But
And it's easy to get mindless about that. That's the only hazard I see.
so that's why I think I agree with you, and that's why I think it's better before you start the practice to actually contemplate regret. Because if you're just doing it while, think about it, if you're just prostrating, right, and then let's say you're still prostrating at that point, or you're breathing heavily and you're kneeling down and you recite that part, and you're reciting it fairly quickly, it's going to be hard to feel the regret. Because, again, maybe you will if you get good at it, but then other times you might just be like, if you just did like 35 prostrations, then you're going like, maybe you're thinking, either, wow, I'm tired, or you might be thinking, how many calories did I burn? I don't know, whatever. But, but either way, it's not, it's not helpful. I mean, it's not regret unless you think that way. So I think that it's good to do both. Yeah. And then, anyway, in there's also rejoicing, and then there's the restraint is in there too. But so, anyways, so it's like a structured practice of the four opponent powers. And actually, it's interesting, in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Shantideva says that somebody who's really practicing the Bodhisattva way of life, and ideally would do this practice 3 times in the morning and 3 times at night. So that takes a lot of time, of course. So it's up to you. You don't have to, but a lot of I'll say this too. Actually, just on a practical level, actually, if you like Tibetan lamas, and also like really good Tibetan practitioners, who I know personally anyway, most of them seem to do this practice every day at least. Many you see like they'll do 100 and something prostrations every morning as part of this practice. So it is a commonly done practice. And I guess what happens is if you get somebody does it that much every day, and then they get quite good at maybe the contemplation while doing the practice. But okay, and this practice purifies all different kinds of negative karma. Of course, if you do the prostrations, then you're engaging your body, your speech, and your mind. That's another advantage to this practice, right? Is that like, whereas you're thinking about the either you're thinking about faith in the three jewels while you're doing it, or you're thinking about your negative karma, right, and purifying. So there's your mind. Your speech is reciting the names of Buddhas, and your body's prostrating. So you're engaging all 3 doors, and that's again because we create our negative karma with our body, speech, and mind. So this is a practice of engaging our body, speech, and mind all together in the practice of purification. So that's another advantage to this practice. Whereas like if you think about Vajrasattva practice, right, you're not usually engaging your body much, and you're just sitting, but your mind and your speech are engaged if you're reciting the mantra. But unless you happen to do prostrations during that, you're not necessarily using your body.
Is that the only difference, or are there differences in the benefits, I guess, between those 2 practices?
Yeah, there are differences in the benefits too. So like this practice, if we go through those lists, right, it's like that each of these Buddhas, but then also there's the amazing benefit of doing prostrations, right, which are in the commentaries, right, that you create so much karma by doing prostrations. So this practice has those kind of benefits. Vajrasattva is comes from tantra, right? So it has a different. This comes from a sutra practice, right? And Vajrasattva practice comes from a tantric, the tantras actually, numerous tantras. Vajrasattva practice appears, or most actually all the tantras, I think. So or it's associated with all the tantras, let's put it that way. So what is this? Is a sutra practice, and that's a tantric practice. So if so that's one difference. And then another difference, I think, is like, on a daily basis, if you do Vajrasattva practice like 21 times, then it stops. Like one of the 4 qualities of karma is karma increases, right? So if you do the long mantra 21 times, or the short mantra of Vajrasattva 28 times a day, it stops your negative karma from increasing, is the commentary at least. So that's a difference. But I guess another thing I'll say is like my impression of most actual, like, like on the one hand, don't try to push yourself to do more than you can do, but most my impression is that most of the Tibetan lamas and like yogis and strong practitioners, I think a kind of a common thing would be to do. They might get up in the morning and do this the 35 Buddhas practice, maybe like 100 some odd prostrations, something like that, and then at night they do Vajrasattva practice, so that they're continually purifying, right? So that they're making purification part of their daily life in a fairly intensive way that way. So like I think many lamas, right? They'll get up and they'll do this before they do their dharma. They'll do this and then they'll engage in their morning meditation, and then at night they check up on how they did, for the day, and they do the Vajrasattva practice, and that way you can see how the practice is quite intensive.
Would this be classified as a prayer or a meditation, and what's the difference?
It's a good question. Like if you're doing it correctly, then it would be. Actually, if you're doing it correctly, it would certainly be a meditation, because the definition of meditation in Buddhism is familiarizing your mind with something virtuous, right? So for sure, it would be a meditation because you're familiarizing your mind with regret for negative karma, with faith. But as you're doing this, you'd be contemplating, faith in the Buddhas, regret for having done the negative actions, compassion, and so on. So for sure, it would be a meditation in that sense. It's two other things though too. I mean, in a sense, there's a prayer in it, right? Because the recitation of names isn't really a prayer, but there's the part, at the end, that's a prayer. So there is prayer there, and it's also what they would call recitation too. In order, so like the reciting of names is a practice. So in Buddhism, actually, that's there's also there's a whole which is not often, I don't know how to say this right, like Western Buddhists have tended to de-emphasize recitation, but actually in all Buddhist or most Buddhist cultures, actually recitation is an essential part of people's religious life, or something like that, I guess you would say. Because if you go to a Tibetan monastery, right, and you see the young monks, many times they're out there and they're reciting things like this, or they memorize whole texts, right? And at night you'll hear them, or in the morning or at night, you'll hear them reciting texts they've memorized, right? And that's part of their practice. And actually, if you study other contemplative traditions, that's a common practice, actually, right? The practice of memorization and then recitation as a form of, ultimately, it is a form of meditation. That like in other words, if you memorize something and then recite it, it becomes a form of meditation. So it's not like they don't like if a monk is reciting, when the monks are reciting prayers. It's actually, I'm just saying now my own opinion. I think that serves a lot of different functions, actually. It's hugely useful. And sometimes I've talked to some people where let's say Tibetans will memorize the whole Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, right? And some of the monks I know, they'll say, when I first memorized it, I had no idea what it meant. Because they were a little kid. Somebody said, go memorize this, and they were a child, and they would start, they were competing with their friends. Oh, I memorized 5 pages, and it was like a school task that was sort of playful, or but of course then later when they receive commentary on it, right? First of all, just the words start to sink in, right? They start to realize, oh, there's a certain meaning to these words so it starts, what's the word, percolating or something for them. And then they receive a commentary, and then when they start actually practicing well, right, as they're older, then it's such a gift, right? They have it right there. So then they're walking down, then they're in some situation. Let's say the patience chapter, right? Somebody does something to provoke them. Now they receive the commentary and they can go, oh, Shantideva said, and they can recite it in their mind at least, right? And apply the meditations in that way. So it's incredibly useful if somebody can memorize things like that for real practice in daily life, especially, right? Because because it's not like we can get, I don't know, if somebody goes up to you and starts insulting you, you're not going to rip out a book, first we don't have it there, and then, hold on, let me look up the patience chapter, I forget what Shantideva said, I'm really freaking out here. So they have it with them at all times. Actually, just while I'm saying it, I think they're a huge advantage. That's one. Another huge advantage to memorizing things like that is that's a huge one. That one I just said is for daily practice, but also then wherever you are, right? You can in other words, you can just meditate on these topics, right? Like Shantideva is incredibly profound. Wherever you are, you're on a bus or on a train or on an airplane. If you memorize it, then you just can sit there and review it, right? You can go through it and meditate, and then also it's like a refuge. People who get sick, right, or have are in a coma or very sick and can't move around or something, then they have all of it right there, right? And then another one is it helps with development of concentration too, so you can meditate more deeply, you know, in that way. So there are huge advantages to that recitation practice. I'm just mentioning it because like sometimes in the West we really emphasize like almost like non-conceptual meditation, or we like meditation without words. But actually those meditations, you know, so much is that. And yeah, I'll just say one other thing, just I'm putting in a plug for like for it. I remember one time, I'm just sharing a story about my own stupidity, but I was talking to Khenpo Rinpoche and I was asking about his life for editing that book. I think I told you a couple of this story, but so Khenpo Rinpoche, I was asking him his life. So he was a little kid, right? He had just become a monk. He was like, I don't know, 10, I forget how old. He had just become a monk, and he said, so the first thing monks do is memorize, right? They have a teacher, and the teacher says, memorize this book. And so Rinpoche said, so I became a monk, and I was a little kid, and I went to the monastery, and I started, I started my practice of memorization. And this is my stupidity. I asked a very bad question, a stupid question, not bad, but just stupid. I said, so when did you finish that phase of your education and move on to your more genuine studies? You know, or something like that. I forget how I phrased it, something like that. And Rinpoche kind of smiled and said, not yet.
He's still memorizing?
He's still memorizing, yeah. He's 70-some odd years old, right? He's still memorizing texts. And I was like,
Now you said the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Is that a good one to memorize?
oh yeah, that's amazing. I mean, there's no better, you know, because it's also poetry. You know, one is it's poetry, but it has every meaning. You know, the whole, like the Dalai Lama said that. I think he said that there's no, in his view, on the practice of compassion, on the practice of bodhicitta, there's no better book ever written than that. Was the Dalai Lama's opinion? And it seems quite true, right?
So would a way to memorize it is what, just like learn a new stanza every day, something like that?
Yeah, and then eventually, you know. And one thing I'll say, actually, just while I'm going, this is a total tangent now, but I'll just say one more thing. Like, yeah, so that would be the way to do it, is you can memorize one stanza or even one line a day, you know, it's fine. I mean, just do whatever you want. There's no rush, but it's just like you can do it slowly. But since in our culture we don't memorize that much, like it seems that the key is to keep repeating it for a long time until it really gets. Otherwise, sometimes Westerners make the mistake of anybody can memorize something if you do it over and over, right? And you try to. But sometimes Western people, we make the mistake of memorizing, let's say, a chapter or something, or a series of verses that we like. But then if you don't keep repeating it for a while, it gets lost. But if you repeat it for long enough, then you can stop and you'll never lose it. You know what I mean? And so the problem is, you know, if you just recite it for like a month or two and then you stop, it'll probably get lost. But if you recite it for a number of months, it really, becomes familiarized, and then even if you stop for a while, it'll still be there.
Like short-term memory versus long-term memory.
Yeah, and it seems like, and I guess you have to have enough, I don't know, probably, I mean, in the brain it's probably enough neuronal connections there to keep.
So like if you do like sitting meditation and decide is it the same, like the same power? I mean, because if you read all the time, you don't need to sit down and to memorize. You don't need to sit down and meditate. But if you meditate, you don't need to memorize it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, the idea would be this. Like, I'll give an example. Like, let me give one example of what I was talking to a friend of mine, actually Roger Monroe, who you met at that time, who's a monk who's done a lot of retreat, you know, and he was giving me an example, like, because he was giving me an example where he was saying, like, for example, a certain like a sadhana, like a set of meditations, right? You know, that are like you do in sequence. Like, let's say even something you could even do that. Like with Lam Rim, for example, right? There's this part where you visualize the Buddha, you say a certain prayer, you know, nectar comes into you, and then you contemplate the Lam Rim topic, right? But also, if you can contemplate the Lam Rim topic, if you say a verse, let's say from Lama Tsongkhapa's Foundation of All Good Qualities, right? For example, about that topic, then that helps, right? And so the example he was giving was this: is like he was saying, you know, of course, meditation mainly happens with the mental consciousness, right? Or that's what meditation is, right? It's training your mental consciousness. But so he was giving this example, he was saying, so he wanted to meditate on the topic, right? But then if you're like this, so you're in meditation on the topic, and then you have to open your eyes and look again, and then go back, right? And then you open your eyes and look again, and you go, that what happens is you're going back and forth between a mental consciousness and an eye consciousness, right? So as your mental consciousness, if you develop concentration where your mental consciousness is becoming more and more deeply, because he was doing long retreats, right? So he was saying, as the mental consciousness goes deeper and deeper into like focusing, that then when you have to, you know, for beginners, like for if we're just starting out, then it's like, okay, oh, what does that mean? Oh, okay, you know, it's not that big a difference. But as we start developing deeper concentration, it becomes a problem if you're always having to go to the eye consciousness in the back and then because you're having to go into a grosser state, and then a more subtle state, and then a gross state, and then a subtle state. And so it's like, it becomes an obstacle to developing deeper concentration, was his experience. He was telling me, and I thought that really made sense. It's logical, right? Like, so
because because I read somewhere some people like those Tibetan monk, when they're debating, then they realize emptiness.
right.
But so I was you do it over and over, then you realize emptiness without sitting down and meditating.
Yeah. Oh, and that's that's true. But that realization is the inferential like in other words, they're gaining the inferential correct realization of emptiness. Yeah. But then they still, even then, still they'll have to then go and apply that, right, in meditation, and they have the huge advantage, right, of they've already realized it. So then they can sit down, think a few. But actually, when those monks go to meditate, then, right, they've already realized emptiness. So they'll sit down in meditation. They'll review a few lines they studied when during their debates, right, because they memorize tons of stuff in debate, right. In order to debate, they have to memorize all these texts. They have to be able to say, well, Lama Tsongkhapa says, so they memorize all that. But then when they sit down to meditate, they maybe just say a couple verses, and their realization comes back to them, and then they just focus on that realization. But if they lose it, let's say because they haven't developed calm abiding, right? So they might lose that, but again, they have it right there. So they'll say, oh, wait, Lama Tsongkhapa said da-da-da, or Gyaltsab J said something, whoever. They contemplate a few Nagarjuna's line, and then they come back to the realization, and then again they can. So even with them, like it's all in there. In other words, they have it all inside them, right? Yeah. So it's really useful.
It's easier.
Yeah, so it just makes it easier. That's, I think, part of the reason, obviously some people I don't know, maybe somebody could memorize it just to win debate or something, that's not good. But if they memorize it that way, then it's there when they go to meditate, and they don't, they can just sit down and meditate and come back to that realization. Because even once they've realized emptiness through inference like that, they would still have to bring it back to their mind in order to meditate on it later, right? So they have to do something to kind of bring back that realization, and then they meditate on it, and they can develop calm abiding on that. Anyway, we went far afield from what we were doing. But okay, so let's do this. Let's actually let's do two. Let's do first. Let's we'll do the actual recitation in a minute. But first, let's together. Let's do the first verse together now. Let's actually start, but we'll do the guided meditation on refuge and on the regret part, the intelligent regret, and then we'll actually do the prostration part. And again, when we get to the prostration part, there's no pressure, right? In other words, do what you want. So, but actually, so you can just visualize prostrating, you can actually prostrate, you can do whatever you want.
Can you just say that, comment on prostration? You said that there's a lot of benefit in doing prostration. It's not something that in the West people really do.
Right.
So, just in a nutshell, what's the benefit of prostrating?
So the prostrate, one, actually, I'll start with a joke, right? Not a joke, but, some of the Dalai Lama says, well, at least you get some exercise. Not like some of the jokes, he's like that, right? Because he's talking to, I don't think he would say that to Tibetan monks, maybe to Western people he says. But there are many different, so one is, I guess there are many, I think. So one is engaging your body in the practice, right? And there is so it's not only, we tend to sometimes be, Western, many of us Westerners, we like to be intellectual or sort of think or maybe meditate, but not. We don't always engage physically. So one is it's engaging your body, right? So that's good because our body, we use our body all the time for other things. So it's good to use it in something that's dharma related. That's one benefit. But then there are other benefits like and there are actually many levels of this. So I'm not sure how much to go into, but. According to the Tibetan tradition, there are different levels. So one is this: is when you do a prostration, right? Actually, maybe I should go through this. So you do first of all you do this. Like you put your thumbs inward, and then you put your hands together. And actually, they say that only Buddhist, all non-Buddhist traditions put their hands like this when they pray. Buddhists put them like that.
Because the fingers are in.
The thumbs go inside, yeah. So there are many different levels of meaning to all the different parts of prostration. I'll just go through a few. So one is, like if you, the symbolism, right? You can go like that, right? So it symbolizes just that gesture that you see Buddhists do when they prostrate symbolizes what they're thinking as they do that, right, is body, speech, and mind. So touching the top part symbolizes your body, here obviously symbolizes your speech, and from a Buddhist perspective, your mind is in the subtle mind is in your heart, right? So in that sense, you're already, just by doing that, right, you're thinking, I'm purifying my body, speech, and mind. By putting your hands together even, right, there's so many things like this in Buddhism. In general, the left hand symbolizes wisdom and the right hand symbolizes method or compassion. So there's a symbolism to that too. By bringing them together, then it symbolizes bringing together wisdom and compassion. Like that. From a tantric perspective, there's also a huge symbolism of like that the hands symbolize different qualities and touching those parts symbolize. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but it symbolizes the different chakras. And so there's a tantric symbolism to prostrations as well. So it creates an imprint karmically to later be able to work with those chakras. You know, and the chakras are like energy centers in the body. And then from like the commentary, and again, like I can only say what the lamas have taught, but the Buddhist commentary is this: is that so then if you actually do, so like that's just a symbolism like that, right? When you do that gesture. But then whether you do there's like a half prostration or a full prostration, right? So with the prostration also, the advice is that you don't put your hands out, you keep them together. That's the tradition. But then like Khenchen Rinpoche and also Lama Zopa Rinpoche, they all say the same thing, which is that, I guess it comes from the Buddha, is that, so then if you do either of those prostrations, like to the enlightened beings, again there are many, like actually, well, I'll say this first, the word the word prostration is, it says, if you look at the Tibetan side of this, it says that at the end of, if you look at the Tibetan, it says chak se lo, right? So chak se lo means I prostrate. And actually chak is mudra, right? Chak really means mudra. And so, in Tibetan Buddhism there's this thing called the Mahamudra, right? Like that's a Sanskrit word. But so actually ultimately what you're saying when you prostrate, there's this chak se lo, what it really means is, there's actually a famous story of, what's his name? I forget the exact details, but I think it was, I'm forgetting his name, but one yogi in Tibet. And they say he went to the Jo Rinpoche, the most famous statue of Buddha in Tibet. And he went there and he looked at the statue, right? And he said, well, countless eons ago, like you gave up self-cherishing, I was still cherishing myself. You realized wisdom, I was still caught in ignorance. I guess I have no choice. You deserve me to like you've earned it. I'll prostrate to you. He was kind of being practical, but the meaning there is actually of chak se lo is like that. In other words, it means I'm aspiring to become I'm aspiring to achieve what you've achieved. That's really the meaning behind prostration. It's not. What's I would say? It's like it's an expression, a physical expression in a sense, of one's own desire to become what one is prostrating to, right? So so actually ultimately it's useful, in other words, you can visualize the Buddha, but it's actually deeper meaning if you're recognizing the inner qualities of the Buddha, right? Their realization of emptiness, for example. And then you're prostrating, that's it, because you're saying, I want to realize that too, actually, right? That's the meaning behind prostration, or I want to realize bodhicitta too. And then the Tibetans say that, if you prostrate with that kind of mindset, right, then each atom that your body covers, I think is, that you create the karma to take that many rebirths as a universal monarch. I think it's something like that. I have to look it up, but I think it's that. Or is it one? Yeah, I think that's correct. And actually I want to say something about that too, right? So like, the idea would be, because at first I think from a Western point of view we can say, oh, that doesn't make sense to me. But actually I want to share, just think about this, right? There's a contemplation actually. Because I said this with the Vajrasattva practice, right? There came a point in the Vajrasattva practice where you're supposed to think, now I'm totally purified. Right? And then we have a resistance to thinking that. Like we have a habit of thinking, I'm totally pure. We say the verse, now I'm totally purified. Vajrasattva says, now my child, right? So Vajrasattva, the Buddha, Tantric Buddha is saying to you, you're his child, and you're totally purified. Right? And somewhere in the depth of our mind, we're thinking, well, maybe not totally. I'm kind of still, I'm still kind of not so great. Right, that's our habit. That that purification practice thing we have to eventually let go of. And so I think I think it's really important. Sometimes with us Westerners, since it's not our culture, it'd be easy to like say, oh, like you're creating, because what they say is actually you create like how many atoms there are under your body all the way to they call it the Vajra ground, but let's say to the core, the molten core of the earth, right? So how many atoms is that? That's like, it's uncountable, right? And they would say you're creating the karma, with one prostration you're creating the karma to become a universal monarch, more powerful than any king alive, for an entire lifetime, right? So it's like billions and trillions, and trillions is too small, right? That many lifetimes. And I think this is an important part psychologically, that's the commentary, but I want to just add my own personal view on that, just for contemplation, right? Is like, I suspect that if you think about it, there's some part of you will think, well, not me, no, I'm not, like, I'm not creating that kind of good karma, right? Like what this tradition is suggesting is suggesting changing, right? It's suggesting changing your view of who you're becoming, right? Because if you generated bodhicitta, you're actually trying to become a being who's infinite, right? A Buddha is infinite, right? All the Buddha's virtues and qualities are infinite. So actually, like, a trillion times, like 500 trillion times a million trillions or something lives as a universal king, and then you're doing 35 of those, right? I think that if you contemplate that, right? On the one hand, there'll be a resistance, like, no, I didn't create that much good karma. But on the other hand, I think there's something useful about that, right? Like to say that, because actually that's not that big a deal. You're trying to become infinite. So that's good. You're dedicating, so you're dedicating trillions towards infinity, or towards an infinite goal for others, right? And then if you do those prostrations with bodhicitta motivation, then it's actually that times all sentient beings, which is infinite. So then you're creating infinite birth with each part. So I think the idea, there is some idea behind this, of that, like of sort of, what's the right way to say it? I don't know. Like it's supposed to change your self-image ultimately. Right?
Break
And so
your self-cherishing.
Yeah.
Break your
Right.
self-cherishing.
Yeah, because usually we feel like, actually self-cherishing, like Lama Yeshe says that, right? Usually we have this like self-pity mind and the sense of like, I'm so limited and I have so little, I have to hold on to it, and somebody's going to take it away, and then if I give something to somebody else, then I'll have nothing. That's our normal like state of mind. And if you do this practice, like Khenpo Rinpoche said, right? Visualize those Buddhas with pearls and all these things. And he said that's an auspicious condition for this. So you visualize them on thrones with elephants, and if you can go into detail, actually, each one is on a throne of elephants, and there's pearls between the Buddhas, and they're in, you can visualize wish-granting tree behind them and all that. And like, so all these practices actually, Vajrasattva and this practice, it's to completely, like, so our ordinary view is like, if I give something, then I have less, and then maybe I'll have nothing. Right? And this is the opposite, right? It's saying I give all that, I'm creating like infinite worlds of merit, and I'm giving them all away, and like there's nothing. And that's actually how bodhisattvas are, right? And there is in the teachings of these guys, right? That bodhisattvas can give away everything because they know they'll always.
They can generate more merit. Is that what?
Yeah, and that they are generating more merit as they give it away, so they're not scared, and they're not doing it to get something back, but there's just like a natural knowing that if they're living in that way, everything not just works out fine. There is this creating the cause to become a Buddha. It's not just fine. It's like, it's wonderful in that sense. Like, so it's like a whole different. It's like, so we're trying to. I think that with this practice, we're trying to create a whole different sense of ourself and who we are in the world. Like in that, and so I think it's really useful to contemplate that idea. Like, imagine that you do one prostration, right? Just contemplate that. Imagine that you do one prostration, you create, like what would that be like, right? That you create the merit or the karma, right? To be like a world emperor, for and then you think, and I'm giving that away. I don't want it.
So it's not like exaggeration.
No, Tibetan say that's really true. That's the karmic result.
Yeah, because I try to cut exaggeration to the one stuff. So is it like going extreme?
Yeah, Buddhist view is that that's true. In other words, that's not an exaggeration. It's like.
Extreme.
But you don't think, right, if you're doing prostrations like this, this is the Mahayana practice, right? Nothing, and that's because I want to rule everybody, and I want, you know, the idea is like, I'm creating that merit and I'm giving it to all beings, right? And like, you know, like, that I'm creating that kind of karma and I'm giving it all away, and like, and that then I'll create entire worlds, right? Then where I can benefit, like I'll create worlds to benefit others. I'll create whole planets. I'll, you know.
How do we give away the merit that from this practice, or any merit that comes our way? What's the actual mechanism of?
Oh, that's the dedication. Remember we did the dedication.
Dedication.
So you say, you know, by any, it's in here, but you say like, you know, may this merit, you know, through this merit, may I quickly attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. That would be a short example. But actually, we can do, eventually, you can do what these Buddhas did. You know, like, you know how I said, like, these Buddhas dedicated their merit. May anybody they dedicated, right? Whoever hears my name, may all their karma of anger throughout all beginningless time be purified. We can also, so we can do general dedications, right? You know, or we can do specific dedications, right? So you can think, right? If you create all that merit, then you can think, like, you know, if you want to, right? You can think, you know, through this merit, you know, you can go into detail, right? May every person, you know, if anybody just sees me, may they be purified. If anybody touches me, may they be purified. If anybody hears my name, even if they say my name in anger, may they be purified. You know, all that you can dedicate everything.
It's a wish.
It's different than a wish, though. They differentiate. Kenshin Shaitana, I wondered that, actually. And he clarified there are two different things. There's a prayer and there's a dedication. And so the idea is this, is that like a prayer is more like a wish, right? So if you say, like if you say, may I, you know, if you were to, like, I'm going to give a negative, or I mean, not negative, but like a worldly one. If you say, may I have $1 trillion, right?
Right.
That could be, I mean, that's like a wish in the form of a prayer, right? May I, because you're asking, you know, may.
But that's a self-cherishing.
That's a self-cherishing, yeah, I said I'm not giving a good one.
Okay.
But that's different from dedication. In dedication, the idea, like, so, like, I'll give it in Buddhism, right? That there's a difference. If I were to sit down and say, you know, may I, well, just let's use bodhicitta. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings, right? That's a wish, or a prayer wish, we'll call it, right? That's different from if I just did this practice, let's say, right? And then I say, I just created a huge mass, like I generated bodhicitta, I practiced, I did the 35 Buddhas of, you know, practice, I did it, you know, with the best of my ability, I created a mass of good karma through doing that. Now I dedicate that mass of good karma towards my becoming a Buddha. So those are two different things, because from a Buddhist perspective, it's karma that creates, and actually, you know, go into like, so the idea is this, like, actually, this is how Kenshin Rinpoche explained it, which I thought was a good way of explaining it. A wish would be like this, like if I were to say, I wish I could build a golden Buddha statue to share with you all, with the center, let's say, right? That would be a wish, right? And then if I were to say, Buddha, may I be able to build a golden Buddha statue to share with everybody, that would be a prayer, right? I mean, obviously I'm praying for it. But that's totally different from, the way Kenshin Rinpoche, he used this analogy, he said, that's different from dedication. Dedication is like this. It's like, then, if I go out and buy, right, a big gold, a sheet of gold, right? That's like having merit. In other words, now, like before it was just wishing, right? Now if I have a big sheet of gold, that's like having merit, and whereas merit's valuable, like gold is the point there. And so, what Kenshin Rinpoche said is, having merit, like having created good karma, that's what that means, right? Having created good karma doesn't determine how that karma is going to ripen, right? And so, so he gave this example. He said, if you have a big sheet of gold, right, and then you hire a goldsmith. So let's say I hired a goldsmith, right, and I said, make this into something. And then and then he, you know, and let's say I was vague about it, and then I said, I don't know, you know, what's the word? And I was very attached to having a comfortable toilet. And so the goldsmith said, okay, so I'll make it into a toilet, you know, and he made a golden toilet. That would be an example. I mean, that's a metaphor Kenshin Rinpoche was using for incorrect dedication, right? Where the person is not very mindful, and so they say, oh, I really like a comfortable toilet, and I don't know, I'm just giving an extreme example, right? Whereas
the dedication would be taking that sheet of gold and saying, I want it to be a Buddha statue, and I want it to be a statue of Shakyamuni Buddha, and I want him, you know, holding a golden bowl, you know, like a traditional statue, and with his hand in this gesture. You know, then the goldsmith would turn into that, right?
So are you saying that all good, all virtue, or all good karma needs to be dedicated? Is
Yeah.
that an essential step? Is that where you're going
Yes.
with this?
Yeah.
Oh,
And if you don't dedicate it to Buddhahood, right, or something infinite, if you don't dedicate it to enlightenment, let's say,
okay.
or something infinite like that, then it will only ripen as what you have subconsciously in the back of your mind, or in some way that's like limited. Does that make sense?
Becomes worldly dharma.
Yeah, it'll become something limited. Yeah, exactly. It'll become something worldly. It'll become something limited. It won't become. It won't give an infinite result of Buddhahood. And so, so it's up to you. In other words, if people want to, and that's where, like, if you look at the three scopes of the Lam Rim, sometimes people, it's like people will dedicate, right? They'll say, I dedicate my merit for, to have a future rebirth, right? The low scope I'm talking about, where they don't generate bodhicitta, right, or even renunciation. Then they can create, like, actually those practitioners sometimes create a lot of good karma, actually, right? They do a lot of effort, and then they dedicate, and people are, I mean, you meet people like this, right? Where they create a lot of good karma, they're generous, they give money to monks, they, you know, they don't kill, they don't steal, they don't do that, they're kind to others, and then they actually do dedication. They dedicate, you know, by virtue of this, may I be reborn, you know, someplace where there's no suffering and where I can be at peace and people are all kind, and, you know, like a heavenly realm, right? And from a Buddhist perspective, they say, well, then they dedicate in that way and they get that result. And then they live in that heavenly realm for however long, and then that karma runs out, and then they go take rebirth someplace else. Because that was all they dedicated for. So whatever they, whereas because karma is not somebody else, is not some external being who's keeping track and telling you, you know, who's creating heavens for you and writing up a tally sheet. It's all driven by your mind, right? So if your mind dedicates, like, for something limited, then it becomes something limited, and you have that experience, and then it runs out, and then you go back to whatever the next karma that has to ripen is. Whereas if you dedicate that, if they did that same practice, those same practices, and they dedicated it for all sentient beings, without any self-cherishing, right? So towards all other sentient beings, to become something, you know, forget about even the word Buddha, right? If they dedicate it, may I become something that's infinitely valuable to all, and infinitely helpful, and that liberates all sentient beings everywhere, right? That's what a Buddha is, in a sense. But if they're dedicating, that's an infinite dedication, right? May I become something that is available to every sentient being throughout the entire universe to lead them to a permanent freedom from all suffering. Right? Well, that's an infinite wish. So because the mind is infinite, the result will be infinite. So that's why dedication is so important. Because it's the mind, right? It's the motivation that determines if karma is positive or negative, but it's the dedication that determines how it will actually ripen. So it's two different things, right? Whereas if you do an action with a negative motivation, then you don't have any merit to dedicate anyway.
So then there's a two-step process that you described. There's accumulation of merit and virtue, and then there's the dedication of that merit and then
Yeah.
virtue. Is that, am I getting that right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And that's why every practice, yeah,
It's like buying a gift and never putting it in the mail
Yeah.
to the person you want to send it to. So
Yeah.
we have to address it.
yeah, that's a good amount. That's a good metaphor. But okay, so let's actually do. Oh, now actually, well, it's up to people. I'm just realizing it. So it's 10 to 12, and so I guess we were, you know, usually at some point we take a break to order lunch and then we meditate more because it takes a little while. So what do people want? Actually, maybe we should do the 35 Buddha. Are people okay with eating a little later? Like we'll just do this practice and then we'll take a break. Right after this practice, we'll take a break, order lunch, come back, and wait. You know, do another short session while they're delivering it. So. And so we'll do it brief, but so let's recite the first verse here on page 43, and then we'll stop. Everybody's going to share her Nutrigrain bar.
So just sorry, one last thing.
Right.
Is this practice both the accumulation of merit and the dedication of that merit? I'm just trying to apply this whole principle explanation that you've given to now the practice.
Let's see. Yeah, it has dedication in it. Yeah. That's why this is because the Buddha designed it, so this has all the things in it.
So
This has everything in it.
accumulation and dedication.
Because it says, you'll see it when we get to it, there's dedication part. Okay, so we're just going to recite the first verse here 3 times, in English, right? so on page 43, we'll recite that and then we'll pause. So, homage to the confession of the Bodhisattva's downfalls. I, throughout all times, take refuge in the Guru, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. Homage to the confession of Bodhisattva's downfalls. I, throughout all times, take refuge in the Guru, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. Homage to the confession of Bodhisattva's downfalls. I, throughout all times, take refuge in the Guru, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. So just pause for a moment, right? First, for the refuge part, right, just briefly generate, right, first a sense of fear, right, of your own future suffering, right, because you're subject to, because of just being a normal person, right, you're subject to infinite kinds of suffering, right? Illnesses, aging, death, loss, not getting what you want, having all kinds of unpleasant things happen. And then that's just this life, right? And then future lives after death, to all different kinds of rebirths. And then not just you are in that state, but your mom, your dad, your children, your friends, your relatives, your enemies, strangers, everybody. So generating some sense of trepidation about those sufferings that you yourself and others are subject to. We turn to the three jewels for refuge. Recognize that especially the Dharma itself can actually liberate. The wisdom understanding the ultimate nature of reality, even just like less attachment creates so much less suffering, less anger. And then all the other antidotes to overcome negative states of mind. So we take refuge in the Dharma, we take refuge in the Buddha who taught that, and the Sangha who have realized it and can help us. So generating that kind of feeling, then we generate actual refuge. And then you think, right, having generated refuge, right, that I'm doing this practice of confession of the 35 Buddhas for all sentient beings. Each recitation of a name, each prostration, it's not just it's not for my, I'm not doing it on behalf of self-cherishing. I'm doing it on behalf of every sentient being throughout the infinite universe to purify all my karma, every last bit of negative karma, so that I can manifest and create virtue, so that I can become a Buddha to benefit all beings. And then take a moment to start generating the intelligent regret. So if your goal is to become a Buddha, think of particular things you've done that create obstacles to that. So actions done out of attachment, actions done out of anger, actions done out of confusion. So just take a couple minutes to actually contemplate, silently. I'll be silent and just contemplate for like 2-3 minutes to generate a sense of regret for particular negative actions. So now we'll actually recite the names, and you know, while we're doing that, right, you can keep contemplating, right? So whether you're thinking about regret, you know, or thinking about faith, Buddhas, it's up to you, you know. But there's the idea is, right, or thinking that you wish to achieve what they're, you know, as you're thinking that you're wishing to achieve what they've achieved, you know, whichever of the contemplations you want to, it's fine, right? But you want to engage your body, your speech, and your mind in the practice. So there are various things you can contemplate while we do it. And again, you know, so I guess what I want to say too is, so if you want to sit, you know, and just go like that, do that. If you want to stand up and do that, do that. If you want to do short prostrations, do short prostrations. You want to do long, do long. It's up to you. Just do whatever you want. But if you want to do prostrations, then just clear out, you know, clear out a space to do them. And if you want to do a physical one, or if you, so just to have you take a minute to clear out an area if you want to.
Short one is what?
Oh, and just to clarify that, so any prostration, right? So it starts like you start with your hands like that at your heart, right? And then ordinarily you can touch. So with each prostration, you touch 3 places, right? Or like your body, symbolizing body, speech, mind. And then a short prostration would be you would go down like this and touch your head, and then quickly come back up, and then start again. Right? Whereas a long prostration is the same idea, except you go down, all the way down, and then back up. So it's just you know, it's just whether you only go to the 4, 5. They call it 5 points, right? Your knees, hands, and forehead, or your whole body. It's just up to you.
If you're just sitting, is there kind of a benefit to still kind of?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
'cause
still good to
seems
do that.
more kind of active with the body.
Yeah, no, it's still benefits. So we'll do it like last time. I think it's better that way. Like so, there are some parts that you're kind of supposed to read together, like taking refuge or generating bodhicitta. They're kind of in bold, I guess. But the visualization parts, maybe I'll describe, because I think otherwise it's hard to visualize. You know, it's just hard to read and visualize at the same time. So why don't we do it that way? And I'll do a little bit, you know, of just like guided contemplation, right? The steps, making sure we do all 4 powers well. The 4 powers to purify. So let's get in the kind of, you know, make sure you're whatever you like, you know, what posture for meditation. And so then, so on your right side, visualize or imagine your dad. On your left side, imagine your mom. And you can add in like your besides your mom, your female relatives, like your grandmothers, your sisters, aunts, and so on. And besides your dad, you can visualize like male relatives, grandfathers, uncles, brothers, other male relatives. In front of you, you can visualize any personal enemies. And then also if there are like groups of people towards whom you have a certain negative association. So whether that like you know, whether that's if you have certain negative feelings about whether it's people from a certain country or a certain part of the world, or people of a certain political view or a certain religious view, a certain, I don't know, philosophical view. People who disagree with you about things that you find are important. Anyway, anybody who you feel a sense of aversion towards or upsetness towards, feeling upset or agitated towards, visualize them in front. And imagine that behind you are your friends. And all around you are strangers. And you're all sitting, right, on the ground together. The idea here is that you're actually being aware, right, that everybody, all those sentient beings, right, all those infinite beings, right? Including all the strangers. You know, although they have different facial expression or different clothing or different names, that we're all exactly the same in many ways. One is we're exactly the same in wanting to be happy. We're exactly the same in wanting to not suffer. We're exactly the same in that we can die at any moment. We're exactly the same also in being like caught in a cycle of suffering, conditioned by ignorance. So we're generating a sense of even-mindedness or equanimity. And also by thinking about all those others being exactly the same as you, totally subject to every kind of suffering. Generating some sense of motivation, right? That our motivation is to benefit not just ourselves, but all those beings. Our enemies in front, our parents, our friends, strangers. You can also recall that all of your past happiness was dependent on the kindness of others. All of your present happiness is dependent on the kindness of others. And all your future happiness up to enlightenment is totally dependent on others. So your well-being is dependent on them, their well-being is dependent on you. And you're all totally equal in having problems, being subject to illness, being subject to death, being subject to losing what you want, to losing people who you love. Everybody's exactly the same in those most important ways. So while still visualizing all those sentient beings around you with a sense of compassion and responsibility for their well-being, since we're going to take refuge, then we also visualize in the space in front of us, kind of at the level of our crown, but in front of us, facing us. We'll visualize Vajradhara, so blue and a Buddha, tantric Buddha, wearing jeweled ornaments, holding a Vajra bell. He's blue in color, but he's like made of light. So he's not. He looks kind of like a blue rainbow, kind of like translucent, like a rainbow, transparent like a rainbow. Embracing his consort, Dorje Palmo, and she's red in color. And you can think, that they're taking the form of like a father, mother, tantric Buddha in union, but their nature is that they're your guru. And they embody the Dharma. And in this context, they particularly embody great compassion and then great bliss, realizing emptiness. So with a sense of trepidation for your own suffering and the suffering of all other sentient beings around you, and with a sense of faith, right, that compassionate bodhicitta, and also like great bliss, realizing the ultimate nature of reality, emptiness, is a valid refuge, right? A valid way of liberating yourself and all others from suffering. And you can imagine that yourself leading all sentient beings, right, in the taking of refuge. And then on page 8, we'll read the refuge and the bodhicitta prayer together. Page 8. And the practice. I forever take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I take refuge in all the three vehicles, in the dhakas and dakinis of secret mantra yoga, in the heroes and heroines, gods and goddesses, the bodhisattvas and Buddhas. But most of all, I take refuge in my holy Guru forever. I forever take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I take refuge in all the three vehicles, in the dhakas and dakinis of secret mantra yoga, in the heroes and heroines, gods and goddesses, and the bodhisattvas of the 10 bhumis. But most of all, I take refuge in my holy Guru forever. I forever take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I take refuge in all the three vehicles, in the dhakas and dakinis of secret mantra yoga, in the heroes and heroines, the gods and goddesses, and the bodhisattvas of the 10 bhumis. But most of all, I take refuge in my holy Guru forever. I must become Ruka in order to lead all sentient beings to the sublime state of Rukahood. I must become Ruka in order to lead all sentient beings to the sublime state of Rukahood. I must become Ruka in order to lead all sentient beings to the sublime state of Rukahood. So then, imagine that, first of all, that Vajradhara, right, the blue Buddha in the space in front of you and red Dorje Palmo, are pleased, right, are happy that you've generated compassion, bodhicitta, refuge, and so on. Because they're happy because it's going to lead you to and others to happiness. So they smile, and they come to the crown of your head. They dissolve into light that melts into the crown of your head, dissolves into your heart. And think that through that dissolving, right, that their mind and your mind are mixed, blended. Giving rise to a sense of bliss, and to a recognition of emptiness. The I, that seems to exist independently, intrinsically in the center of the chest. Although it appears to exist independently, it's not findable. If you search your body and mind, you can't find it. And also it doesn't exist somewhere other than your body and mind. So now that very awareness of emptiness, and the awareness of, even if you're imagining it, right, you can imagine great bliss realizing emptiness. So that kind of mind starts to manifest a form. What it manifests is just above the crown of your head, a syllable poem which transforms into a 1,000-petaled white lotus. So imagine it's kind of an open, very open lotus. And kind of in the center of that open lotus is an ah, which transforms into a moon disk, like a cushion, a white cushion made of light, flat, and it looks like the moon. In the center of that moon disk is a syllable hum, which transforms into a white vajra marked by a hum. And so now from that hum at the center of the vajra, light rays emanate, going in every direction. So that includes into you, right? So it like completely, that white light from the crown of your head totally like completely fills you with white light. That's like incredibly blissful, the incredibly blissful, wise energy of all the gurus and Buddhas. And it also strikes all sentient beings around you, right? Your mom, your dad, strangers, enemies, friends. So you and all others are completely like illuminated, right? Totally illuminated by this white light in the nature of great blissful energy, of wisdom energy. Everybody's negative karma is purified. You can imagine that all those sentient beings transform like into Buddhas. You can imagine that like all realms and all sentient beings dissolve into light, which comes kind of back into the vajra and hum and your crown. Then the hum and the vajra themselves meld into light, white light, and transform into Haruka Vajrasattva. So Buddha Vajrasattva on your crown now is white in color. He has one face and two arms, and he sits in the full lotus posture. His right hand is kind of at the level of his heart and holds a vajra. And his left hand is like by his hip and holds a bell. His consort, Dorje Nema Karmo, embraces him. They're embracing each other. She's also white, and in her right hand she holds a curved knife, symbolizing cutting off egotism, and she holds a skull cup in her lap. And since they're tantric Sambhogakaya forms of the Buddha, they're made of like white, radiant light, and they have ornaments like jeweled crowns, heavenly silks, bracelets and anklets, necklaces. Each has a necklace. So they're kind of dressed like celestial beings. Each of them at their crown has an om, at their throat an ah, and at their heart a hum. So the hum at their hearts like radiate out and draw all the Buddha's wisdom energy to the space in front of you and them. Right, they're facing the same direction as you, so they draw to the space in front, kind of like all the Buddhas. All the Buddhas are there in front. So now we're going to make offerings. So if you turn to page 10, we can read this together. So now that we've drawn them, those beings here, we're going to make offerings. So we're going to first bless the offerings. Like the basis is the water bowls, and then we'll make offerings. So we start on page 10. Om Kandarai Om Svabhava Shudo Sarva Dharma Svabhava Shudo Om. Om, all dharmas are pure of own being as a mind. All is void. Out of the void appears the seed syllable A. It transforms into a huge white skull cup containing 5 meats and 5 nectars. They melt and become an ocean of Amrita, energy of divine transcendental wisdom. Om Ahom Hori. Om Ahom Hori. Om Ahom Hori. Om Vajra Sattva Argam Pradijam Zoha. Om Vajra Sattva Pradijam Pradijam Zoha. Om Vajra Sattva Pradijam Zoha. Om Vajra Sattva Pradijam Zoha. Om Vajra Sattva Om Vajra Sattva Om Vajra Sattva Om Vajra Sattva They become non-dual, the wisdom beings, who are the wisdom energy of all the Tathagatas, joyfully sink into Vajrasattva's divine heart, becoming completely one, like a drop of water sinking into the ocean. Again, brilliant lights radiate from the home and the divine heart, invoking all the initiating deities of the 5 families. Om Panchakula Sapari Vare Argam Padyam Pushve Tube Alake Gandhi Nirvashata Pradijam. O Tathagata, please bestow upon me the Haruka Vajrasattva initiation. Upon this request, all of the Tathagatas hold up their initiation bases, which are full of Amrita energy of divine transcendental wisdom. Om Sarva Tathagata Abhishekata Samaya Shriye Om. The divine body of the perfect absolute wisdom, Vajrasattva, is completely filled with Amrita energy of blissful transcendental wisdom. So Amrita overflows and transforms into Shobhya, who adorns Vajrasattva's crown. The initiation deities melt into light and sink into Vajrasattva. At the center of the moon disk, the divine heart, stands the seed syllable Hum, surrounded by the 100 syllable mantras. Om Vajrasattva Argam Pradijam Pushve Tube Alake Gandhi Nirvashata Pradijam Zoha. Om Vajrasattva Om. Non-dual divine wisdom, magnificent inner jewel ornament of all other sentient beings, supreme unchanging everlasting great bliss, indestructible magnificent wisdom mind that releases all sentient beings from all negativities in speech and mind, especially broken vows and samaya. To you, Vajrasattva. We'll jump ahead to the next page. We'll do the short mandala. Page 14. And the secret one. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine these as a Buddha field and offer. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. The right view of Shunyata is one with the wisdom of great bliss.
Wisdom transforms into Mount Meru, the sun, the moon, and all other phenomena in the universe. I offer everything magnificent to you, ocean of great kindness, who are liberated and who liberates all other sentient beings as well. The objects of my attachment, aversion, and ignorance, friends, enemies, and strangers, my body, wealth, and enjoyments, having sense of loss and hesitation, I offer this collection. Please accept it with pleasure and bless me and all sentient beings with freedom from entering poison. Yadam Guru Mandala Kamyataya. Through ignorance and delusion, I have broken and damaged my pledges. Holy Guru, who has the power to liberate me, my inner master, holder of the Vajra, whose essence is great compassion, Lord of all migratory beings, to you I go for refuge. Bhagavan Vajrasattva, share of all defilements, who has attained all realization and has passed to the other shore. I request you to please purify all negativities
and broken and damaged pledges, myself and all others.
So let's pause there and actually meditate a bit. Right, so we've done refuge now, clearly, but let's meditate on the power of intelligent regret. So think of either particular negative, specific negative actions or types of negative actions. And really try to develop a sense of why you should regret them, or if you should. What kind of suffering do they cause? So actually right there, like if you contemplate it very extensively, like just take one type of negative action that you do, and then you can analyze, right, how it causes suffering to others in the short run. How it causes suffering to you in the short run. How it makes you feel, right, both emotionally and feel about yourself when you do that action. How it stops you from achieving your long-term goals like enlightenment or liberation. It stops you from having happiness in this life, and it stops you having happiness in future life. And then also, right, your habituation to that action, right, leads to various kinds of suffering results, right? So one is it leads to actual bad births, right, bad future lifetimes. It's like whole lives of suffering come. Right? In this life it seems like you're just doing something, right? But actually you're planting a karmic seed. So when that karmic seed, when the conditions are right, and that seed ripens, then it leads to like an entire rebirth. So in this life it's causing suffering to you and others, and then in future lives it causes more and more suffering, whole lives of suffering. So like in some cases, if it's a negative action actually, then mainly it would cause a rebirth in one of the three lower realms. There's no opportunity to practice Dharma. There's very little chance to help others or to be happy yourself. And then even if you're eventually, human again, right, it leads to living in a bad environment, right? That karmic seed leads you to live in an unpleasant environment. And also to have bad experiences happen to you, similar
similar to whatever you're doing. And so all kinds of problems come to future lives because of that, in this life and future lives because of the action. And then also, another kind of karmic result is that you're doing that action also ripens, that seed ripens as you tending to do that action again and again and again. Life, in this life, in future lives, endlessly in samsara. And then again taking more negative rebirths, and again having bad environments. And co-creating, through group karma, those kind of bad environments for yourself and for others. So that endlessly, if you do that, if you continue doing that action, the regret, right, comes from recognizing, actually, that in this life you don't have peace of mind, you don't feel good about yourself, and you die with that kind of feeling. And then endlessly, right, you continue creating suffering results, all kinds of suffering results for yourself and for others. So that you suffer and others suffer. You do that action in relation to others, then they do it back in relation to you. They suffer more, you suffer more. It goes on and on and on. Just like one war after another war after another war after another war. One cheating after another cheating after another cheating. Misery after misery. If you don't break that cycle, it's just endless suffering for you and for others. So that if you think about that pattern in detail, eventually you could feel almost like horrified or nauseated, or like you swallowed poison. It's just like something that you have intelligent regret about, right? That you very much want to purify and get out of your system. And so you see that without purifying that particular kind of negative action, actually you can never become enlightened. You can never even be liberated from samsara yourself. And much less being able to help others, you'll actually continue causing problems for others. Then with that kind of feeling, right, that you've got to purify this because it's totally unbearable, right, to just live meaninglessly suffering from now until the time of your death, and then to go on suffering after your death. And to just suffer endlessly is totally purposeless. And it's because of these kinds of karmic actions. So feeling that's like unbearable, that you would suffer and cause others to suffer over and over for trillions and trillions of years, it's totally unbearable. Right? So you turn to Vajrasattva on your crown, right, asking for their help, the Buddha's help. Due to your feeling that way and thinking that way, light radiates from the hum at Vajrasattva's heart to purify you and all beings. Makes offerings to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Again, the energy of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas' purity, wisdom dissolves into Vajrasattva. Now we'll begin reciting the mantra, but remember while you're reciting it that you're visualizing Vajrasattva on your and everybody's crown, right, with white nectar descending into you and all beings, purifying you of all those negative karmas, and you can continue contemplating regret, and also like faith in Vajrasattva, and then the visualization of the nectar descending. And so you can visualize and contemplate in that way, and just for a while we'll recite that mantra on page 16. So you can just recite it at whatever pace is comfortable. And actually try to recite it, like so that your lips are moving, so it's like you're actually reciting with your mouth, but not loud, like just like a whisper, like so that only you can hear. Does that make sense? Like so very quietly, so only you can hear it, but you're actually saying the syllables on page 16. And we said last time, you can either do it in the, so imagine those nectar descending, and the nectar is washing away, right, any tendency to do that action, right? So it's being cleansed. You can develop, faith, and Vajrasattva is purity, right? Vajrasattva is wisdom and purity. So you're generating faith and wisdom and purity of your own potential for enlightenment. Visualizing the nectar, and you can contemplate more on regret, right, of wanting of the reasons why you want to change. So let's just recite for a while while meditating. So we'll pick up on page 17 just to kind of conclude that round of the sadhu. So again, we make offerings. Oh, non-dual divine wisdom, magnificent inner jewel ornament of all other sentient beings, supreme, unchanging, everlasting great bliss, indestructible, magnificent wisdom mind that releases all sentient beings from all negativities of body, speech, and mind, especially broken vows and pledges. To you, glorious Vajrasattva, I prostrate. Vajrasattva says, O child of good family, your negativities and obscurations are damaged or broken pledges are cleansed and purified. So pause just for a moment and take that in. And actually think, wow, so all my negativities are purified. And try to feel like pristine, clean, clear, pure. Actually, like, feel that you're letting go. Letting go of your past. You're letting go of your identification with anything negative. And then we'll recite the power of restraint. From now on, I'll abstain from all the vices that I can abstain from, and I'll abstain from those that are extremely difficult for me to abstain from, for 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute, or at least a few seconds. So there again, just pause, and think about any specific negative karmas that you were working with, and actually make like actually try that out, right? So try making an actual vow, right, to yourself and to Vajrasattva. For however long, whether it's just for a few seconds, for a day, whatever, like what it says there. If you want to do it forever, for a day, for a minute, for a second. But make some commitment to it for at least one negative karma to restrain from, if not more than that. Try to really be specific without, in a way that's realistic, right? So you're not lying to yourself, right? But that you're working with something and actually working with change. Maybe we can go ahead, we can together maybe read the absorption and the dedication. So, your vow to abstain from creating negative karma pleases Guru Vajrasattva, who melts into light and absorbs into you.
Those who have received great initiation by
So anyway, either way, then just like imagine that they've absorbed into you and meditate on emptiness, whatever way you understand it, right? So that actually that the doer of the negative actions themselves, and the object of those negative actions, right, were interdependent, and therefore never existed independent. So the appearance that there was like a independent, separate self, independent other, independently existing action, were actually they were dependently arisen, like illusions, like dreams. They never existed in the way you perceived them in the first place. And so actually you were grasping, right? It's something that wasn't real, and that's why you did the negative action in the first place. So now you recognize with that awareness, we can do the dedication verses there. Because of this merit, may I quickly become Ruka Vajrasattva, lead each and every sentient being into his divine enlightened realm. May the precious holy mind, not yet born, rise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase from. Okay, so we'll stop there. So I just want to pause at any, actually about the practice, any questions? Or about the karma stuff, anything coming up for anybody at the moment? Great. So maybe what we can do is again, something similar to what we did last time, but I want to see, like, we always try to do like an interactive exercise. So what I wanted to suggest today is this, is like, actually all of you here have been like, we've been studying karma together for a few months, right? And so people have been working with that, trying in various ways to work with a particular karmic pattern. And so, or more than one, probably, hopefully, over this time. And so, first of all, to think about it, like that if there were particular ones that have been easy or difficult to change, right? Like, cause sometimes, if it's like something you don't do very often, or it's like an unusual, if you did something once and it was a mistake, then that could be like, you notice it can be easy to see the faults of it. But then there are some that like, maybe you've been doing for years or decades, right? And so it's not so easy to change then. And so I was just thinking about, so take a minute to think about some examples of karmic patterns of yours that you've been aware of as we've talked about these things, that you've, focused on when we did like practices, that you contemplated. And what I wanted to ask to do is like in small groups, like groups of 2 or 3, is just to like to share your experience with each other and to talk about like what's easy, what's hard, what worked so far for change. It's like because it's hard, right? We can use each other's support. That's why I'm suggesting this. Does that make sense? And so like to ask each other for support or give each other, not to ask for it, to share your experience and then to give each other support around. And also I want to say this too, like either make sure you vary who you're talking with or vary which topics. So don't meet with the same people and say, oh, I'm doing the same thing. That's not helpful so much. So either think of a different karmic, either meet with the same people you've been talking to before, but think of a different karmic pattern, or switch it up a little bit so you can get different input. But again, so think of ones, karmic patterns where you've either made some shift, or if you feel like, I'm not even sure I've changed even though I'm trying, like either way. And then just try to think about what else can you do? How can you keep working with that? How can you not give up? Because eventually anything can change, right? Any karmic pattern arises due to causes and conditions, so different causes and conditions will make a different thing. So you just have to be skillful, right? Okay, so give real examples, but again, do one that you've really been working with and try to give each other input. And if you want to share 2, that's fine. And don't go into 2 bigger groups, just 2 or 3 people and
All right, here we go. Everybody on their desk.
yeah. So one thing I want to just review for a few minutes, a couple things. So, and this is especially for people who are, like actually, formally taking Discovering Buddhism. Those who are here and those who aren't here but will watch the video. Is so like in theory we're supposed to do like what's the word, quizzes or something in this final class. And what I decided, I'm going to start bringing that up at the end of each module. But I just decided, since it's only, there are a limited number of people who are fully doing it and handing in the things, what I want to do is this, I want to tell you the things you should memorize. There are certain topics you should know by heart. And then we'll just do it on honor system. So once you know those by heart, then submit if you want to submit those completion cards. Because like to say, oh, here's a test, I'm not going to, it's like, I give the answers and you fill it in anyway, so it doesn't, it's like, it's honor system anyway. So there aren't a ton of things with karma, but there are a few that you really should know by heart. So one is the 4 powers to purify, right? That we've been doing those over and over, right? So you should know the 4 powers of purification, and we said them earlier. So just again, what are they?
Regret, reliance, resolve, remedy.
Oh no, resolve and remedy are the same.
Oh, sorry.
I say admission.
Is that?
Resolve and remedy.
Admission.
Yeah, like the antidote. That's why I call it the antidote. But you can go like so. Yeah, so you can do it as ours.
Antidote or remedy of this.
Oh, remedy. Yeah. So So, I mean, wait, so there's refuge, right? And, I mean, refuge and bodhicitta,
Relying.
that's reliance, right? Then there's,
The regret is first.
intelligent regret, yeah, we could do it in that order. So intelligent regret, refuge, reliance. let's call it
Reliance,
that.
right?
Then there's the actual, remedy or antidote, right? And then there's restraint.
Well, that's my plain result.
Oh, okay,
Okay, I see what you're saying, alright.
okay, so good, yeah.
My R's are wrong.
But
It's
it's the
different
same
in each
meaning.
book.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, as long as you know the meaning, so
Okay.
those four, it doesn't matter the word.
Somebody called them the 4R,
Yeah,
regret,
sure.
There you
refuge,
go.
remedy,
That's
restraint.
what I did, but the R's get mixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reliance, remedy.
Yeah, so you have to be careful, yeah,
Yeah,
different
I
translations.
can't do it like that.
But you should, so you should know,
Refuge,
Remedy.
remedy, restraint.
yeah, so you should know that, right? Because that's something you have, if you don't memorize it, then how are you gonna get your practice every day, right? So there's, if you're gonna sit down and try to purify, if you don't know what those are, then you're gonna go,
R-E.
you'll leave something out, and then it's not purifying your karma fully, right? Another thing you should know, actually, and really also you should know at least the list of the 10 non-virtuous actions in Buddhism, right? So, so first there's 3 of body. What are the 3 of body?
Killing, stealing,
Stealing,
sexual
Then there's 4 of speech. What are the 4 of speech?
Lying,
Device,
Device of
meaningless
speech.
talk, meaningless.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't
You guys-
Meaningless.
So did you guys all hear that? Though? So it's lying, right?
Divisive speech.
Divisive speech,
Harsh
harsh
speech.
speech,
Meaningless,
Idle.
senseless.
Idle.
Meaningless.
senseless, meaningless speech. Yeah. And then there's 3 of mind. What are the 3 of mind?
Covetousness,
Ill will.
ill will,
Maliciousness.
Wrong view.
wrong view.
Wrong. Those 3. Okay, so those are the 10 non-virtuous actions, right? And then the one other one that would be good to know is the one I covered in the first class, which is this is the only other one. So it's the 4 guidelines of karma, right? Or the 4 general characteristics. You could translate it different ways, right? 4 general qualities of karma. Those are different ways to say it, right? Does anyone remember what those are?
You mean karma is fixed?
Yeah, karma is fixed or
Yeah.
definite. Right,
Yeah.
that's the first one.
Mhm.
Does anyone know what to say?
Karma accumulates,
Increases.
increases.
You know what's that?
Right.
Yeah. So
Increases.
first one. So karma is definite. I'll just remind people. That means the first one that he said. So karma is definite. That means that if you do something with a negative motivation, it's never going to lead to happiness in the long run. If you do something with a positive motivation, it's never going to lead to suffering. It'll only lead to happiness, right? So in other words, love is a cause of happiness, not suffering, and hatred is a cause of suffering, not happiness. That's the meaning.
Or it's
Karma is
definite that you're gonna experience the result. That's what I am.
So isn't there, so one of them is you can't experience the result without creating the cause, right?
Right.
But that's separate than.
Yeah, that's a different.
Right, okay.
So is that the one you're thinking of?
No,
what I-
no. Cause I know that that's
Right.
different.
It's definite.
So it's definite as like, if you do something, you're gonna experience the result.
Unless you, well, because usually it's if you do something, you're going to experience a corresponding result. That's
Right.
positive or negative. But there's an exception unless you purify, right, or unless you destroy them.
Right. But is that what the definite means? Or is definite?
I think,
Cause the way you said it,
yeah, it means like the way I interpret that one is that it means that because you can't say it's absolutely certain you're going to experience the result. Because let's say you do a positive karma and then you create a lot of hatred, you can destroy that positive karma, right? Like
so
so
I think you
with anger.
lessen the,
You can eventually not experience the result actually if you do enough. Like so, for example, if you do enough purification practice, you can totally destroy the ability for a positive karma, a negative karma rather, to ripen.
right.
So in that sense, it's not absolutely definite. So the way you would say it is it is that if you create virtue or a positive or negative karma, that it's definitely you'll experience a corresponding kind of result unless you purify it. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, okay.
So the next one, karma increases, we said, right? So that's like, that a positive or negative karma is if you don't do something to counteract them positively, if it's positive or negative, then they keep increasing until they ripen. Right? And then the third one? Does anyone remember?
Just say
That
that.
was, the
you said
result,
it. Right.
you can't experience the result without creating the cause.
Yeah, so that means like that whatever you do experience, you created some cause for that, and then you often give an example, right? Like that, right? Actually, it just happened. Right? If you talk to people like in a storm zone, right? You know, like that, so many people can have total devastation, and one person not like, oh, I was 1 block away, or I was 1 block this way.
Mm.
You know, so that there's some or you know, car crash and so many people can get hurt, and then one person doesn't get hurt. So because if you don't have the cause, you can't experience that result. You know, that's the teaching. That's the examples they give sometimes. And then the fourth one.
The karma is not just gonna disappear. It's not just gonna disappear, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The time
That
doesn't.
doesn't go away.
Yeah. Time doesn't fix karma, right? Like, it doesn't get rid
So
of it.
like you were saying, guy was saying, so if you like, you exhausted, like, you say, I mean, how do you, it doesn't come back? Like if you you exhaust the karma, it doesn't come back?
So there's 2 ways you can exhaust the karma, like a particular karmic seed. One is if you counteract it, right? Like so purification, like we're doing.
Yeah.
Or the other is you can, if it fully ripens. In other words, there's a point where, like sometimes the Buddha would tell stories like that, like somebody did some negative action, and then like he would say for 500 lifetimes they take rebirth as such and such, and then that karma was finished, so then then the next karma started to ripen. So like sometimes like a particular, of course while those 500 were happening, they might have done more negative karmas that are then going to ripen problems down the road. But that particular seed finally got used up or something. So one way that a particular seed can get, like it loses its you know, but it's a bit like let's say an oak seed falls, right? So then it grows into a huge oak tree, right? So that oak seed that particular seed is not going to create more oak trees. Of course, that oak tree is going to have a lot of other seeds, and then that's a different issue. But that one, so that's like that a particular karmic seed can be exhausted through experience. But then whatever causes you're creating, then they produce more other results. Or, you know, but it's a different, that's another dependent arising, actually, right? That's a next dependent arising. That depended on the previous, it was dependent on the previous one, but it's a different karmic action that leads to a different, you know, each karmic action will produce a different result, another result or something. But definitely a particular karma can eventually sort of be exhausted, and then it does get exhausted, and then it sort of, and then the experience stops. Right? So there are stories like I said, the stories where the Buddha say, oh, this person for 500 lifetimes, they took some better, and then it like finished, right? And then that was done, you know. And then they went on to become something else and have a different kind of experience.
So how do you phrase the last one?
The way I sometimes say it is, once a cause is created, it's not lost.
It's lost.
That's the way that's the language Lama Zobrumshe I think uses. It doesn't get lost. But I'm not sure. There are other ways to translate that, but that's how he said it. But that's how I remember it. Okay, so those are the things really you should know. You know, if you're doing it for like, I don't know, if you're, you know, so once you know, so know those, and I'm going to try to do that each class is like go over just the things you should know by heart, rather than asking, because if you ask it as a quiz, you know, people also like, I don't know, for me that's not that useful. You memorize something and then you forget it, and you know, that's not helpful. So just like, you know, practice it enough or so that you know those things, and they're kind of part of what you do, and then that's that. I want to say one other thing too, like, so on the 10 non-virtuous actions, we did cover those briefly, but not that much, so I want to say a few things about them that'll help with the next Vajrasattva practice. And that's this, like, so the Buddha taught those 10 as an example, right? Like, they're not the only negative actions, right? There are other negative actions that one can do that are not on that list. But he gave that as like, he gave that was all. You know, what I was going to say is that they're good, they're useful just in the sense of, one, I mean, they're useful in various ways, but one way they're useful is in terms of purification is one can contemplate them. You know, so like, if you're trying to think, well, what do I need to purify, right? Like if you're doing the Vajrasattva practice, so you can go through, right? Like, well, when did I ever kill, right? Like, and the killing in this case doesn't, I mean, the worst form of killing would be, you know, like another human being, right? But it can also include insects, animals, fish, whatever, you know, like, so you can like contemplate that, right? So like if you're going through doing like a bunch of Vajrasattva practice or prostration practice, right? And then like, you know, when did I steal, right? And stealing can be like, you know, of course it could be armed robbery, but it could also be like just taking something, right, from a coworker. It could be stealing credit for something, you know, like I want to get the promotion, so I'm gonna, you know, take credit for this job that wasn't really mostly me or something like that, right? You know, so there are all different forms of, there are various forms of stealing, right? You know, and then, you know, sexual misconduct, right, the same thing. In other words, that one can contemplate, you know, that and think, when did I do that, right? To purify it. And then if you go through, right, than the verbal ones, right? And again, like I mean, actually, you know, and right, there will be lots of examples of those, right? Like you know, when did I talk meaninglessly, wasting somebody's time? When did I, you know, lie, right? And you know, and there are big lies and small lies, but if you're trying to purify, you want to purify all that, right? And then of course the mental ones are even harder, right? Ill will, like, because you know, there are a lot of times where, you know, like harsh speech, right? How often do you actually say something really mean to somebody, and then how often do you think something mean? The thinking, you know, by definition, is more often than the speaking for most people. There are some rare exceptions, you say it every time, but usually, right? You think negative thoughts towards somebody more often, and then sometimes, right, it comes out, like you get overwhelmed or you're really mad, you say something mean, but you know, so if you think how many, you know, and again, right, you get it, that this is not, obviously, right, the purpose of that would not be to, like, feel bad about yourself and develop low self-esteem or something like that, right? It's intelligent regret, right? It's just saying, you know, and it's not to say, like, and also, so I say this, like, you know, like you're not, or is that, with that power of restraint, right? Like, especially with the mental ones, like, take the example of covetousness, right, or ill will, like, you know, at our level, for the most part, we can't say, I'm never going to have ill will again, right? Like, because something can happen, and in a moment you can just think, oh, you know, whatever, you know, something, a negative thought, right? So it's easier to restrain from, you know, actually the physical ones are the easiest part, right? Whereas it's easy, you know, it's easier to say I'll never kill somebody than to say I'll never say something mean to somebody, right? So we have to build up, right? But we can definitely start by saying I'm never going to kill another person, right? That kind of vow. But then we can build up, right? Now, then you can say, okay, I'm also never going to hit anybody, right? Then you can say, okay, how well can I do? I'm not going to reach this level of verbal negativity, and then you can get subtler and subtler. And then you can see how eventually, right, a person could reach a point where they could, you know, even restrain quite well from ill will, right? Where it's going to be very brief. You know, the Dalai Lama often gives that as an example, right? Where, like, somebody at one point would be angry for a long time, and they get shorter, right? Until, like, you know, they're able to, you know, maybe something bothers them, but it's quite brief, actually, you know, and they don't get so, you know, and then also there's a difference between feeling upset and ill will, right? Like, or if somebody hurts your feelings and you feel upset, that's not ill will. The ill will is like wanting to hurt them, right? Anger, like wishing you could harm them back. So you get the idea, right? That these are like these are, what's the word? They're partly to serve as like tools for contemplation, those 10. Right, so that as you're doing purification practice, you can actually go through and think of those as categories, right? And then if you've taken other vows, right, then those are other good examples, right? Like, so you can go through if you take the Bodhisattva vow, right, then you can go through those. And that's another thing you can do as you're doing Vajrasattva practice. So like if you were doing a retreat on Vajrasattva, you could have like your Bodhisattva vows out, and you could look at them and think, okay, how am I doing with that? Oh, there's one I could do better at, and then you could like work on it. And again, it's not to beat yourself up. It's to encourage yourself and to say, okay, everybody makes mistakes. I'm gonna try to purify that. You know, imagine the nectar like totally purifying it, right? If you're doing Vajrasattva, and then make some resolve. I'm gonna try better, and then like if you do it step by step. Okay, well tomorrow I'll try this little thing. Let's see how I do. You know, and so on. Then eventually anything can change. That's the important thing, right? And it's really an important point. I mean, I've emphasized this a few different times, right? But because actually, like Nagarjuna says that, right, about emptiness. He says because things are dependently arisen, right, everything can function, and everything changes, right? If things were not dependently arisen, then they would be permanent, right? So, like, you know, like if you said, well, I'm an angry person, and that's who I am, right? And if it weren't dependently arisen, that would mean, well, I'm always going to be an angry person, right? But that's not true, right? Nobody, even the most angry person, isn't angry all the time. Right? There's nobody actually who's angry all the time, right? Or desirous, right? Sometimes it could seem like you're desirous all the time, right? Like certain times in your life you can say, oh, wow, I'm always wanting something, always like craving after something. But then if you actually analyze it, no, that's not true, right? There are moments where you feel satisfied, right? And then you can sort of expand that. So it's dependently arisen, right? So that means if it's dependently arisen, then it can change, right? You just have to create different causes, and then the different result will happen, right? So to do that, right, you have to engage in all these practices. Like, so you purify, you contemplate, right? You work on the antidotes, right? Like, so that's obvious, right? If you're angry a lot, right? If you do purification for the past anger, and then you contemplate over and over again the faults of anger and the methods to cultivate patience, and then naturally it'll just start, right? You'll get a little less and a little less and a little less. And sometimes it's really helpful to contemplate on that, because sometimes you talk to somebody, like I have friends, I mean, you know, where it's like it's if you just look like from for one day, then it's hard to see. Like you can think, oh man, you know, here I've been practicing, how did I do that? Look how mad I got or something. But then you have to like step back and go, well, how am I really doing though? Like, you know, and you have to think back, what was I like, you know, a few years ago and how am I now? And are there areas where I'm less angry and less, what's the word? Like, less full of cravings and more satisfied, more like content, right? And less jealous, you know, or whatever the delusions that are strongest for you. Because that's actually that should be the best, that's the best way to tell how you're doing in your Dharma practice, right? Whereas you don't have to go to a teacher to ask how you're doing in your Dharma practice. You can know, right? If those things are a little less and a little less, then you're doing well, right? And if those things are getting more, then Dharma's totally not working, you know? Like, you know, and that doesn't mean for a given day, right? If you have a really bad day and you know, but everybody has those, right? But it's the overall track of it, right? Is it getting better? You know, when it used to be 5 days, if it was one day, well, it's progress, right? Like I had a really bad day and I was in a terrible mood, but like you have to analyze that. And I want to say one other thing, just for your own contemplation before you meditate. It's important when assessing your own progress with these things to differentiate two different things. One is the results of a previous karma, and the other is creating new karma. Does that make sense? Because sometimes people get confused on that. Like, and I want to say an example. Like, if you feel really bad, right? Like, if you suddenly, like, something happens and you feel really down about it, right? Like, you know, then you feel discouraged about your Dharma practice. That's not correct. Like, in other words, that's some other karma ripening, right? Or so like if something bad happens and then you feel discouraged or you feel sad or you feel whatever, like actually the correct way to view that is, oh, well, that's some karma ripening, good. Like, the question is, do you then from that, right, say, those jerks who did that to me, I hate them, I'm going to get even, you know, then you're creating a whole new karma, right? Or if you say, you know, this bad thing happened, and so I feel down about it, and so I need to go, you know, the correct thing to do when I feel down is like I need to go buy a whole bunch of new stuff, and I need to like go out and eat like, you know, like a lot of, you know, overeat and do this, and then like, you know, have an affair or whatever, I don't get drunk, I don't know, I'm trying to give examples, right? Like, and then I'll feel better. The way I'm going to cope with these bad things that happen is I'm going to go do that, you know, then you're creating new karma, right? But if you just think, that's a bad result, you know, I feel bad, it'll pass, you know, like, and you tolerate it, right? That's not bad karma. That's just that's purifying, you know, that's experiencing a purification of some past thing. So you have to differentiate, because sometimes people like feel, like, you know, something negative happens and they feel, you know, maybe upset about it or something. That's fine. Like, that's just being a human being, right? That's not, you're not creating new karma with that. It's when it goes over into a new action, right? And so that's where we have to be careful, is when our old karma ripens, what we have to be careful about is not to then create the cause of a new suffering by reacting to it, by doing, because we have seeds to do negative things, right? We have habits. So the trick is if something bad happens, you know, if you tolerate it and then you go on and practice Dharma, that's fine, right? That's not, I mean, that's not a sign that you're not, you know, but if something bad happens and you say, well, I'm going to go, you know, get drunk and get in a fight outside, then, you know, then you're creating a whole new problem. Yeah.
I'm not sure how this works, so maybe, I don't know, maybe you can answer this. Like, if you have a bad thought, like, oh, I'm gonna get even with that coworker, or whatever you said before, that jerky person, then, let's say you have that thought, and let's say you have that thought for 2-3 days, or 2-3 weeks, and then all of a sudden you realize that's not, I don't wanna be that kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
So you work on actively dispelling those negative thoughts. Okay, whether it's the following day or 5 minutes later or 2 months later or a year later or whatever. Now, is the thought itself like irreversible, or when you've now sort of dispelled that negative thought towards that person and then sort of looked at them more compassionately or at least neutrally, wishing them no ill will and harm, and you haven't acted on your thoughts, is that still going to create bad karma for every single time you have that thought until you gave it up? Or is like giving it up now sort of like, it's okay, it's just dissipated?
What I would say is this is like, so there's, first of all, like, if you recognize it and you do what you describe, right, you work to dissipate it, first of all, that's Dharma practice, right? That's good practice.
Right,
Dharma.
but like, are you already messed up for what you thought before?
But that's where you would do a purification. That's why you have the purification, is you would say that the Buddhist answer would be, you know, so on the one hand, by recognizing the negative thought and working with it and dispelling it, that's good practice. but that you did create a mental karma while you were angry at them, let's say, right?
Okay.
And that's what you do the purification with. So in other words, you would say, oh, so if you don't purify that, then it will ripen in some way, for at least at the tendency next time somebody annoys you to get angry again, for example, right, and to have that kind of tendency. So that's what you would then do the Vajrasattva, for example, where you would, or some other purification, whatever purification you want, but you would do those 4 powers. You would, so you would think, okay, I don't want to actually have. So you would, in addition to first you would dissipate the anger with that person, but then, like, let's say that night after you did it, what would be excellent to do would be to sit down and say, okay, also I did create some mental karma. I don't want to keep doing that. So okay, I regret it because actually, I don't want that in my mind. I don't want to be like that in the future. Wherever I am, there is always going to be somebody who's like unpleasant. I don't want to feel that mental agitation, and it'll only cause me suffering, and it'll ripen in more experiences like that. So I don't want to have that. And so then you do the purification, and then you purify it and let it go. That's it. Yeah. Because otherwise, it is a mental karma. So if you don't purify it, then the Buddhist view would be it will create a result of some kind, at least in the future. But you can purify it, so that's good. Yeah. So that's why we do the purification too, even on the mental karmas. Yeah.
We're doing more purification, right?
Yeah, we'll do another Vajrasattva. Yeah.
Let's do one more
Yeah.
question. Coveting, how do you define coveting? I've seen it just described a couple different ways that seem confusing or contradictory.
What are the 2 ways?
Well, I've seen it as just craving anything, and I've seen it as you desire something that somebody else has, and you actually connive to take it from them. Which are 2 very different kind of ends of the spectrum, I think.
Yeah, we should look it up, because I've thought of it as I tend to think of it as wanting something somebody else has.
So it's not just that you see something and you decide, ooh, like that would be a good temporary happiness right now, and you think about how to get it. It's literally something that somebody else has that you sort of scheme to somehow take away from them or have for
That's what
yourself
I'm
in some way.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be like. It's not that you're going to steal it, or
Take it from them.
but
It's
wanting
just
to
you want
get
it for
it. Yeah,
yourself.
right. I think it's that. It's a little tricky because like any wanting, you can see why somebody would say the other one too, in the sense that I think usually it's described as the second way, like wanting something that somebody else has.
But what if it's
But,
a good thing? Like you guys did a nice tantric retreat, right? And what if I go, oh, someday I really want to be able to do that too? Like that's kind of, and then I
That's
think
aspiring.
about like the steps to be able to sort of.
Yeah, but that's aspiring. That's not.
Yeah.
I think covetous would be more like it's almost like close. It's not quite jealousy, but it's like it's sort of like the traditional example is seeing somebody else's spouse and saying oh, I wish I could, like even if you're not gonna do sexual misconduct, sort of like
Had a
oh,
wife
wow,
like
I'd
that
like to
or
get
something.
that. Yeah, I'd like to get someone. I wish I had her. I wish I had somebody like that, or I wish I had him. I wish I had somebody, or I wish I had their car, their house, their looks, their whatever.
It's kind of tied to the eight-worldly dharma
Yeah,
thing too,
it's
right?
that.
Okay.
And it is like jealousy, because you said jealousy.
Yeah, I've
and
seen it.
It's similar, but it's not the
Yeah,
same. But jealousy is classified as a form of anger in a way, though, in Buddhism. And this is a form of desire more. So it's a desire-based state. But you can see how somebody would put it the other way too, because in a sense in Buddhism, even if somebody else doesn't have the thing, craving after anything ultimately
it's
causes
like
suffering.
over expectation.
Yeah.
Extreme expectation.
Yeah, and you can see how it makes people miserable, right? Like in other words, if you're going around thinking, I wish I had this person's that, and I wish I, or it's like when when you see little kids, you can see it on kids' face, right? If one kid has a toy or an ice cream, and the other kid, you can see it on their face the covetousness, right? Like it's like, but adults are the same.
Yeah.
Grown-ups are the same way. We just don't show it as obviously sometimes.
Some people do.
Yeah, some people do, right? Exactly. That's funny. But any even if it's not somebody else's thing, any developing craving, right, for something that's a worldly dharma is still a form of suffering. So it's similar in a way. It's not. That wouldn't be really wrong to say that because
Or the-
that's